I've actually been in your school once before. I can't remember when. Was it 3 years ago?
I
I
think
think.
so, yeah.
Yeah, 3 years ago. I'm in Edinburgh today, and I run a education company, but we also spend about 30–40% of our time working with creative projects, and that includes, for example, in 2011 we managed the digital election campaign in Scotland that brought the government to power, and brought the government to power with the majority that allowed it to ask this question: should Scotland become an independent country? So part political, not really, mostly working with schools. So I'll let you, I guess you have questions. I would love to know how this topic came up in a classroom in Norway.
Okay, so Ewan, this year we are studying UK and US politics.
Hmm.
So of course we just went for the Scottish referendum, since that's in already the 18th of September. And I was following some of the discussions you had on Facebook, and now we watched that little video, the yes to vote, the importance of voting, and we worked for some time last Thursday, and we looked at the numbers. And to us it looks like the no still has the majority.
Hmm.
Yes.
That's probably right. I've got another screen. I was trying to look up the latest statistics, because every day they're different, and that's why it's very confusing for Scottish voters.
Yes.
Because traditional election campaigns, you do look at what other people are voting, and people are swayed by what other people say. So if your friends say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to vote X, Y, or Z," then that might change your idea on what you're going to vote. I think what's interesting about this one is that the swings are very slow. So we talk about a political swing when someone changes from normally left wing to the right, or from right wing to the left. And that swing is, in normal election campaigns, can be quite big. So for example, in 2011, when we started working on the campaign, the Scottish National Party, the SNP, which is our government, was 15 points behind the Labour Party, and the swing in 100 days was 18 points ahead, so a swing of 33%, which is the biggest political swing ever seen in an election. Mm-hmm. In this referendum, the swings are very small and very gradual, but the swing is very definitely in the sense of the yes vote. So that over the last 3 months, it's gone from being mostly people saying no and not sure, to mostly saying yes and not sure. And the fact is that when you look at the history of referenda, the question is nearly always answered positively. There have been 3 big exceptions. One of them is Australia, which wanted the independence from the Queen to become a republic. And Scotland doesn't want that. Scotland still wants to have the Queen as its head of state. And the other 2 referenda were in Quebec, and in all 3 examples, the question was a negative question. So it was, the status quo. Do you want Australia to keep the Queen as head of state? Yes or no? Mm-hmm. So sometimes people made the wrong vote because they didn't understand the question. Our question is very, very simple. And I got my voting paper yesterday. I can't show you it. It's against the law to show you the image on the top, but it's in this envelope. So the question is quite simply, do you think Scotland should be an independent country? And very often, in the debates, the countries we talk about are Denmark and Norway. And Scotland, and Scotland's First Minister often talks about Norway as an example of what we could do, so we could all be as happy and rich as you. Although I have to say, the 2 boys I can see in the front don't look very happy.
No. I think they forgot about the oil for a second here, so now they're happy again. So.
Yeah, now they're happy, because you're all billionaires. So
yes, it's always a topic when we are talking with the Swedes. Actually, they always mention it. We don't talk about it that much in Norway, you know, but the Swedes are very envious. So anyway, we'll start with the questions. So this is the first group. They have a question for you. Okay.
okay.
You should stand like I'm standing here. Okay.
Can you swivel the laptop head down just so I can see a little bit clearer? Thanks.
There you
go. We wondered what are the main reasons for so many people to voting no?
It's a really good question. This morning on Facebook, there was a message from a friend of mine. He has multiple sclerosis, and he receives a very special new medicine that multiple sclerosis is when you have lesions on your brain. So he was a soldier, a Marine, in fact, and when he was struck with this illness, it meant he couldn't walk. He's lost the power of his legs before. He's my age. And so he receives this medicine, which is a miracle medicine. It's giving him the ability to walk, run, swim, to play with his son. And so on a very personal basis, he's worried about what does this mean. The only thing he cares about is making sure that he gets this medicine that allows him to lead a life. Now, what's interesting is he was actually asking his friends, does anybody know? Can anyone reassure me? Because this is the only thing I'm worried about. And the fact is that Scotland has always, since devolution, when we got our parliament in 1999, in 2001, the parliament has had responsibility for health. So the National Health Service, the NHS in Scotland, is very different to the NHS in England. The policies are totally different, in fact. And so a lot of English people envy Scotland, our health service, because it's better and provides better care. But what my friend's message on Facebook showed was a real insecurity and uncertainty about existing policy. So what do we actually have already? And I think the main reason I see for no is one of uncertainty. My parents are the same. My mother is a yes all the way. My father isn't so sure, and he's going to be 71 in January. And so, you know, my view to him was, you know, are you voting for yourself, or are you voting for the potential future of your grandchildren? And when you're voting for the potential future of your grandchildren, frankly, none of us know what's going to happen in 10, 15, 20 years. So really you have to vote. A lot of the no votes are votes based on this, based on perceived logic. But in politics, as you all know, politicians change every 4 years. They change their ideas every 4 or 5 years when there's an election coming. So really, a lot of the yes votes, they're voting with their hearts, first and foremost, and what they feel. So many of the no's are based on uncertainty or based on fact. So I don't believe this is right. Most of the yes is based on the heart. And I would ask you, because in Scotland you would have a vote. All 16, 17 and 18-year-olds in Scotland have a vote in this referendum. And what would you vote with? Would you vote with your head or would you vote with your heart? And
yes.
You know, my view is that I know that I struggle not to vote with my heart because I feel Scottish and I want to have control over the things that we don't have control over at the moment, especially in terms of nuclear power, nuclear weapons. I disagree with nuclear weapons, and I disagree with the foreign policy of the United Kingdom and the wars that we choose to get into. And if we had a Scottish government, I think we would be against most of the wars that we have entered into in the last 15 years.
That's a good one. We haven't talked about that one. And then we'll have another question. Okay, one more question, Ewan.
Okay, nice and loud so I can hear.
Yes. We were wondering, if Scotland achieves independence, will you keep the pound as currency?
Yes. That was the big question in the television debate on, when was it? Sunday night. If you go onto YouTube, you'll find different segments of the debate, and it's really interesting. The No campaign in June and May, June, the No campaign, and David Cameron, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, said no. If you don't want the Union, then you're not going to have the pound. But unfortunately, it's not an English pound. It's the British pound. The pound belongs to the United Kingdom, so it belongs equally to Scotland as it does to England. In fact, the first ever governor of the Bank of England was a Scotsman. So it's all intertwined. And so the question that you end up having is, if you're going to have the pound, then it's the same way that Hong Kong is connected to the United States dollar. It's the same way as many currencies in the world are connected to another currency. And the main thing is, we, like Norway, we don't want the euro. I don't think anybody wants the euro at the moment. So you need to have we need to have a currency. In the short term, it will be the pound. In the long term, who knows? But that's a question for a general election. It's not a question for a referendum. The simple question is yes, we would have the pound. The more difficult question is, would we choose to change that at some point in the future? And nobody knows the answer to that.
Okay, thank you. Good answer to a good question. Okay, do you want to have your question? Okay,
yeah, you need to come to the front so that you're close to the microphone.
Yeah, they're debating now, but they're coming slowly. It's happening. Yep.
What will happen with the UK's debt?
We'll take an equal share. It's £5 billion a year that we have to pay back. So the idea of currency, a very good question. It's related to your colleague's question about currency. If Scotland has the pound, then we want to be in a currency union with the United Kingdom. It means that we also need to take a free share of the debt, a fair share of the debt, and our fair share of the debt is about £5 billion a year. If the Westminster British government said, no, you're not going to be in a currency union, we might still use the pound, but we wouldn't be in a union. So if we don't have any of the benefits of being in a union, such as a bank, a central bank, then we don't have any of the debt either. So a decision has to be made by London whether they want Scotland as part of a currency union with responsibility for all the debt as well as all the benefits of a central bank, or whether it does not want us in a currency union, which would mean we'd be like Ecuador. We would use the pound in the same way as Ecuador uses the dollar, but we have no benefit of a central bank, for example, which is a riskier position to be in.
Oh.
That's a very, very complex answer to a very simple, good question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a good question. Okay, let's see if we have another question. Call the other and switch the phone. Yes, okay.
I love your Scottish jacket.
If Scotland becomes an independent country, how will it affect the population of Scotland?
Scotland's population hasn't really grown much at all. It's just started growing again. But when I was 5 years old in school, Scotland's population was 5 million, and the population today is 5.2 million. It's growing slowly, but it is growing, and it's mostly growing because we have lots of immigrants, and Scotland is very pro-immigration. We need more people at the moment. Historically, Scotland has produced more people than we would support, which is why you find so many Scottish people in Canada, America, Australia, because there were not enough jobs here. But Scotland at the moment needs more people for lots of different kinds of jobs. And so I think that answers the question. I think the population will probably continue to rise a little bit, but it won't be. We won't ever have 10 million. I don't think we're going to be like Shanghai.
You're very similar to Norway then in population as well, I guess.
I think so. We have less of the. I mean, it was interesting when I walked around Oslo. I was very aware of a lot of people in the street asking for money, and lots of immigrants who had come with no job, no money. Scotland doesn't have that so much. We tend to have people who come and they find a job or they create a business instantly. So I thought that was really interesting. That the poor face of immigration was maybe more visible on the streets of Oslo than it was on the streets of Edinburgh. But maybe that's just a tourist's perception. I don't know.
Well, that's certainly true, and we have a lot of people who come here just to beg during the summer, actually, and they go back to their countries afterwards. So that is a big problem for us because I don't think we're looking for jobs per se. So
I don't think anybody would come to Scotland for pleasure. We have cold winters like you, but we don't get snow, we just get rain. So people come here to work and make their money.
Yeah. So London will have more ethnic diversity and riots and than Scotland has, I would guess.
London will do, but I think Scotland is as multicultural as any other part of the United Kingdom. Indeed, our Minister for International Affairs, Hamza, is a good friend of mine, and Hamza gave his commitment speech when he was made a member of the Scottish Parliament. He gave the speech in Urdu, wearing a kilt. We have as much, I think there's as much ethnic diversity here as anywhere else. But I think that it's a funny thing. I think there's a common goal, which is this very Scottish values of work hard, do the best you can, try and contribute back to society. You can do that through your taxes, you can do it through your actions.
Yeah. So let's see if there's a last question. Anyone want to? Okay, yes. Okay, go for it. Yes.
We just wondered where and how will the result get published?
The result will be published overnight. So the votes come. You have to vote by 10 p.m. on the 18th, and then by the morning of the 19th, they should all be counted. Should have the result in the morning of the 19th of September, and they'll be announced in Edinburgh.
Okay, yeah. Any more questions? Anyone want to ask a question? We were wondering, this is an important question for you as well. How high attendance do you expect to have on the referendum?
At the moment, we're talking about 80%. Most elections in Scotland have 60 to 65%. This, we're looking at about 80. And one of the reasons for that is because it's the first time that 16 and 17-year-olds have been able to vote. And they want to vote. They want their say. This is a huge issue for their life, probably more than anyone else. So it will be very, very high.
Okay. Well,
and I'm wondering as well, I'm going to ask you one final question back. Do you know what Scotland doesn't have control of already? Because Scotland is largely...
You have to say that again. The connection is a little bad now.
Scotland is largely devolved, so our Parliament looks after a lot of things already. So my question back to you is, and you can go and find this out yourselves, but have a look at what Scotland does not have control over. And I think you'll begin to understand the motivations of people voting yes or no, particularly voting yes. I think that's probably the more interesting question than what does Scotland already have. And you'll discover things like foreign policy, like defence, like nuclear missiles. But you'll discover that there are a lot of similarities between what Scotland doesn't have and the policies that mark out Norway as a very specific example within Europe of a policy in politics and life. I think you'll find it really interesting to see what we don't have control over and want control over.
I think that is a very good direction for us to work on, and especially the foreign politics. I haven't thought about that, so that was a good one. So Well, thank you so much for taking so much time to enlighten us on this topic.
It's a pleasure. I just have a meeting with a school in Singapore we work with, about to have a meeting with a bunch of Australian teachers that we're working with. So it's nice to be able to talk to someone in my own time zone. And be able to say hello. Lovely to see you as well, Anne. It's been a long time since I've seen you your school. Maybe sometime in the coming year I'll have an opportunity to pop over.
I hope so as well. See you.
Catch you later.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Bye.